My mom abandoned me at the airport when I was 16, just so she could enjoy a luxurious vacation with her new husband. Then, the air still reeked of her sickeningly sweet, expensive perfume, a ghost of her presence that felt like a chokehold as I watched her walk away. She didn't even glance back, leaving me, a terrified 15-year-old named Clara, utterly alone with nothing but a cheap duffel bag and a heart shattering into a million pieces. Harsh fluorescent lights of the airport terminal gleamed off the polished floors, reflecting the blur of indifferent faces. The drone of distant announcements and the joyful shouts of other families created a stark, deafening contrast to the silence that had just fallen over my world. It was a cold, lonely purgatory. I stood there, frozen, the din of 1,000 happy goodbyes swallowing me whole. Families streamed past, hugging, laughing, their warmth a cruel mockery as my mother, Eleanor, walked off hand in hand with her new husband, Marcus, and his two impossibly perfect children. A new family. Her family. I was nothing more than forgotten luggage, something she couldn't be bothered to pay to check. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped my phone, my last lifeline. $47. That's all I had. No ticket home, no plan, just a gaping void where my future used to be. For a terrifying second, I thought I might actually faint right there in the middle of a bustling terminal. Then, a name surfaced from the depths of my memory, a name Eleanor had always spit like poison every time she dared to speak it. Arthur. My father. She'd painted him as a monster, worthless, a man who abandoned us, who never wanted me. But standing there, raw and exposed in an airport that smelled like stale coffee and forgotten dreams, I had to take that chance. Any chance. I found his number buried deep in an old message thread, my fingers trembling as I dialed. It rang once, twice, a lifetime stretching between each tone, then a deep, steady voice answered. Arthur. The sound of his name, so close, so real, nearly buckled my knees. Dad, I choked out, tears finally breaking free, hot and stinging. Please, please help me. There was a pause, just the sound of breathing, then a calm, grounded tone I'd never heard from him before. Clara, tell me exactly where you are. I'm on my way. Hours crawled by, each minute an eternity. As dusk bled into the airport windows, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges, I heard a distant roar. Heads turned. People rushed to the glass, gasping in awe. A sleek, private jet, engines humming like a living beast, descended onto the small, private runway, its landing lights piercing the gloom. And then he stepped out, tall, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, his eyes that mirrored mine so perfectly it hurt, scanned the terminal until they locked on me. He opened his arms. Clara. His voice cracked, a raw, guttural sound of relief and pain. I ran. I ran into a father's hug I hadn't felt in a decade, a hug so warm, so safe, so unshakable it threatened to shatter the fragile walls I'd built around my heart. In that moment, nestled against his chest, I knew the woman who'd abandoned me had absolutely no idea what kind of storm she'd just created. The jet cabin was so quiet, I could hear the ragged rhythm of my own breathing. Arthur sat across from me, his gaze a mixture of question and unwavering promise. You're safe now, he said, his voice a steady, grounding balm. Safe. That single word almost made me collapse all over again. I tried to gather myself, wiping fresh tears with the back of my hand. She'd just left me, I whispered, the accusation hanging heavy in the air. His jaw clenched, a dangerous flash in his eyes. Eleanor was always selfish, he said, his voice low, a barely contained growl. But abandoning you in an airport? That I will not forgive. The private jet took off, gliding through the night like something out of a dream. I felt a wild, dizzying relief. No cramped seats. No hiding in a public bathroom, trying to muffle my sobs. No apologizing to strangers for simply existing. Arthur leaned forward, his voice softer now, yet unwavering. You're coming home with me, Clara. For good. Home. The word felt foreign, delicate on my tongue. I don't have anything, I said, my voice cracking. He smiled, a heartbreaking tenderness softening the sharp lines of his face. You have me. The tears started again, hot and unstoppable, but this time, they weren't just tears of sorrow. We landed a few hours later at a private hangar, surrounded by sleek cars and quiet security guards who nodded respectfully at my father. As he led me down the steps of the jet, a sudden realization hit me. He was someone powerful, someone who had waited all this time for a reason to fight. He guided me to a waiting SUV, the rich smell of leather and cedar wrapping around me like a promise of safety. Clara, he said gently once the doors closed, his voice firm. We're going to make this right, but on our terms. My mind flashed to Eleanor's cold smile, her hand around Marcus's arm, walking away without a shred of guilt. What about her? I asked, my voice tiny, but trembling with something stronger than fear. Rage. My father's expression turned lethal, a silent fury simmering beneath the surface. Don't worry, he said. When she gets back, she'll learn exactly what it means to abandon her own blood. I leaned back against the plush seat, the tears finally stopping, my heart beginning to heal in tiny, fragile beats. For the first time in my life, I wasn't alone. And when Eleanor returned from her precious vacation, she was going to find out what it felt like to be left with nothing. The days that followed felt like stepping into another world, a world Eleanor had sworn didn't exist. Arthur's house was a masterpiece of stone and glass, perched high above the city, a view so powerful it made me feel like I could see my whole new life laid out below. There were staff who called me Miss Clara, who smiled without pity, their eyes kind. A soft bed, warm, delicious food, people who asked what I needed instead of what I could give them. My father stayed close, never pushing, never scolding, just there, strong and protective in a way I hadn't dared to hope a parent could be. One night, I sat on the balcony, wrapped in a thick blanket, looking over the city lights, my father beside me. You deserve better, he said, his voice soft but certain. My throat felt tight. She made me believe you hated me. I confessed, the old wound still raw. He went perfectly still, his shoulders tense. I never stopped wanting you, Clara. She kept you from me. The pain in his words made my heart twist with empathy. I'm sorry, I whispered. He shook his head fiercely. No, Clara. Never apologize for being taken from me. Then, as if sensing the crushing weight building in my chest, he reached for my hand. She won't get away with this. A shiver ran down my spine. What do you mean? He let a dark, satisfied smile curve across his mouth. Her new husband, Marcus, he's a real estate investor, isn't he? And that beautiful vacation she's enjoying? He paused, the silence heavy. She paid for it with funds that aren't legally hers. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. He looked at me with a kind of careful pride. I hired a legal team. When she steps back into that house, she'll find it locked with an eviction notice taped to the door. Frozen accounts, no place to run. My heart thudded so hard I felt dizzy. You'd really do that? For leaving you like garbage in a terminal? His eyes hardened, cold as steel. I'd do worse. I leaned into his side, a tiny, defiant spark of safety blooming in my chest. That night, I slept without nightmares for the first time in years, because my father wasn't just rescuing me. He was avenging me. 2 weeks later, it finally happened. I woke up to the buzz of Arthur's phone, lighting up the nightstand. He glanced at the screen, then handed it to me without a word. It was Eleanor. Her voice was thin and strangled when I answered. Clara, where are you? I could hear chaos behind her, the echo of an empty house, the panic twisting every syllable. I swallowed, straightening my spine. I'm with Dad, I said simply. She sucked in a sharp breath. With him? After everything? I smiled, letting her words roll right off me. You mean after you abandoned me in an airport? That was a misunderstanding, she snapped, desperation leaking through her polished tone. I thought you could manage. I laughed. A sound so raw, So sharp, it surprised even me. At 15? Alone. Silence. I came back and everything was gone, she whispered, her voice shrinking. The locks, the money. My father was watching me, calm and proud, a steady anchor. You should have thought of that, I told her, my voice like ice. You walked away from me. This is my house, she screamed, her composure finally shattering. No, I said, letting each word cut deep. It was his house. And you lost it. She went silent again, broken, furious, trapped. You can come back, she tried one last time, a desperate plea. We'll figure it out. I looked at my father, at the peaceful calm around us, at a world where I was truly wanted, and felt the answer settle deep in my bones. No, I said softly. I'm not coming back. And then I ended the call. Arthur reached out, squeezing my shoulder gently. Proud of you, he said. Tears stung my eyes, but they were warm this time, not cold and helpless like before. She'll be fine, he told me, his voice calm, pragmatic. She has to learn what being alone really feels like. I nodded, breathing easier than I had in years. For the first time, I wasn't the abandoned child. I was the girl who walked away on her own terms. The days after that call felt like walking through a new sunrise. No more waking up wondering if I was wanted. No more clutching an empty phone in the dark. I began to settle into my father's world, piece by precious piece. A private tutor came to help me catch up with school. I got to choose my own clothes instead of wearing hand-me-downs. I learned what it meant to eat without apologizing for being hungry. My father gave me space when I needed it and held me steady when the old fears crept back in. One afternoon, I found him in his office, a quiet storm behind his desk. Papers spread across polished mahogany, legal documents and reports. Dad, I said carefully, what happens to her now? He looked up, his eyes thoughtful but unshaken. Her accounts are frozen. The house is legally ours again. She has no way to touch your trust fund. The lawyers are making sure of that. A strange relief flooded me. She might hate me for this. I admitted, a tiny thread of guilt winding through my chest. He pushed back from his chair and came around to face me, his hands gentle on my shoulders. Clara, he said, his voice heavy but certain. You cannot carry the guilt for her choices. She left you, not the other way around. A tear slipped free, but I let it fall. She was supposed to be my mom, I whispered. He nodded, grief flashing in his own eyes. She was supposed to protect you. She didn't. I will. A calm strength spread through me. I realized then that love could be fierce and gentle at once, and that someone could fight for me without making me feel small. Later that night, I lay in my new room, warm and safe, no shadows lurking in the corners. I scrolled through old photos on my phone. Pictures of birthdays where Eleanor smiled too wide, parties where I stood off to the side, always a little apart. I deleted them one by one. And when I finally put the phone down, I felt a weight lift that had been chained to me for years. My life didn't belong to her anymore. It belonged to me. A week later, a letter arrived. Official, cold, stamped with legal threats. Eleanor's name scrolled across the bottom, dripping with false outrage. She was contesting the eviction, claiming emotional harm, claiming I'd been brainwashed. I almost laughed reading it. My father sat calmly across from me, skimming the pages, utterly unbothered. This is desperation, he said flatly. She is nothing. I exhaled, relief mixing with a strange ache. Why won't she just let go? His eyes were steady, unshakable. Because she's losing power, Clara. And people like her don't know how to live without it. The lawyers were swift, sharp, methodical. Within 2 days, they had shut down every claim she tried to make, leaving her letters nothing more than worthless threats. When I came down to breakfast the next morning, Arthur was reading the news on his tablet, a small, satisfied grin playing on his lips. It's over, he told me, legally and financially. She can't touch you ever again. The quiet around me felt impossibly huge, like stepping into a cathedral of freedom. I sat down across from him, my spoon stirring cereal that suddenly tasted better than any luxury meal I'd ever had. "Thank you," I whispered. His gaze softened.
"No, Clara."
"Thank you for surviving, for trusting me to bring you home." I swallowed hard, emotion catching in my throat. He reached for my hand across the table, steady and strong. "You're safe now," he repeated like a vow. That night, I stood on the balcony, looking at the city sparkling below, and thought about her, Eleanor, sitting somewhere alone, the walls closing in, finally learning what abandonment really felt like. And somehow I didn't feel cruel. I felt clean, because I hadn't ruined her. She had done that all by herself. And now I was free to build something better, something that could never be torn apart by anyone's selfishness again. Spring crept in quietly, soft breezes replacing the sharp winter air. I'd started classes again, this time at a school that actually cared about my future. My father made sure I had the best teachers, the best counselors, the best chance. Slowly, I learned how to laugh without flinching. Sometimes, I caught myself reaching for my phone, expecting a cruel text from Eleanor, but then remembered she couldn't reach me anymore. That realization felt like a second heartbeat, steady and strong. One afternoon after class, I walked into my father's office to find him on the phone, calm as ever. "Yes," he was saying, "she has no legal claim, and she knows it. Let her scream." He saw me in the doorway and ended the call with a quiet, final click. "She's trying again?" I asked, a small spark of old fear stirring. He nodded, but a smile played on his lips. "Letters, useless threats. Nothing that can touch you." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "She doesn't get to own you anymore, Clara," he reminded me gently. "Not your heart. Not your story." I stepped closer, hugging him tight, burying my face against the familiar scent of cedar and something safe. "Thank you," I whispered again. He pulled back, his eyes warm. "You did this, you know. You survived. I'm just giving you the place you always deserved." His words sank deep, planting something powerful inside me. That night, I dreamed of her, Eleanor, standing at the airport, her designer suitcase in hand, but no one left to abandon. I woke up feeling light, untethered. I was no longer the girl she'd left behind. I was the girl who had rebuilt herself, the girl who had chosen love, real love, over her mother's shallow, rotting version of it. And that truth was worth more than any revenge could ever be. The morning was warm, sunlight spilling over the marble floors like forgiveness. I stood by my bedroom window, looking out at the life I'd built, piece by piece, far from the poison she'd left me drowning in. My father tapped on the door, smiling. "Ready?" I nodded, slipping on my jacket, calm and sure. Today was the court hearing, the final chance Eleanor had to twist the story. But there was no fear left in me, only certainty. We drove together, silent. The quiet between us filled with an unspoken strength. When I stepped into the courthouse, I saw her sitting on a bench alone, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. No perfect husband, no shiny kids, just a woman who'd burned everything down around herself. Our eyes met. Something in her face cracked. "Clara," she said, her voice brittle. "We can still fix this." I held up a hand. "Steady." "No," I told her, letting every bit of calm pour through me. "I'm done." Her mouth fell open, but the bailiff was already calling my name, already confirming what my father's lawyers had proven. She had no rights to my trust. No rights to me. No rights at all. She tried to follow me out of the courtroom, but security stopped her. I looked back once, saw her reaching for me, and felt nothing. No hate, no pain, nothing. Because she was a ghost. Back in the car, my father squeezed my hand. "How do you feel?" I took a deep breath, letting it fill every corner of me.
"Clean. Bright.
"Free," I said. He smiled, pride and love shining so clear it almost hurt. "Then that's all that matters." As we pulled away, I looked out at the world rolling past the window, wide, open, waiting for me. I wasn't the girl left at an airport anymore. I was the girl who found a way home. And this time no one could take that away. What would you have done in Clara's shoes, abandoned by the person who is supposed to love you most? And do you think her father's actions, while extreme, were justified in seeking justice for his daughter? Share your thoughts in the comments below.